Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Epic Dad Legacy Podcast. Hey, today I've got on Brendan Wall. I'm super excited for this conversation. Met Brendan here pretty recently. We share some similarities. Brendan is the creator of the Dad the Man podcast, which really has conversations with amazing dads all across the spectrum of sports, across entertainment, business, you name it, and has conversations with guys about how they're putting their family first and how that really feeds to their success outside of the home. And Brendan is also a father of two boys, and I'm super excited to have him on and have a really cool discussion today. So, Brendan, what did we talk about?
Man, we had an awesome conversation. We talked about why we should let our boys jump off the roof, and we talked about my story a little bit, how I started the podcast, and kind of the shoulder tap from God that led to me starting that podcast. We talked about some of the key takeaways, some of the big lessons, the big themes that have really become a big part of my own life that I've learned in doing this podcast for almost a year now, about 50 interviews or so. We talked about the state of the world as it is, the culture that we live in, and we talked about how dads, we really think, are the pivotal role in changing the world for the better, and creating a better world for our kids tomorrow. So check it out. Hope you guys enjoy it.
Absolutely, Brendan. Appreciate you coming on, man. Appreciate the message you're sharing and the vision for the company that you have. I think more of that is needed in society, today more than ever. So appreciate it, and guys, you're gonna love this episode. So without further ado, let's hop in. Are you ready to become the dad you know you are meant to be? Good, because this is the Epic Dad Legacy Podcast, where imperfect action is better than perfect ideas, promises kept are more important than promises made, and nothing happens unless you make it happen. My name is Drew, father of three, and founder of the Epic Dad Company. My mission is to help dads up their game and become the husbands, fathers, and men they're called to be. Thanks for listening. Now let's start the episode. Well, it's a little bit different. Bringing you on as a guest than it is, you interviewing somebody. But Brendan, welcome to the podcast, man.
Fun to be here, dude. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, dude. What are you sipping on? You got some coffee going?
Yeah, got a little iced coffee. Had a little. We do the pot coffee.
Jar?
We don't do the Keurig. So yeah, in the mason jar.
Yeah, you are an Auburn guy.
Yeah. I got
mason jar.
hang on to the roots there a little bit. No, I had a little stale coffee left over from the morning coffee pot, so I was like, I'm gonna pour it over a little ice, a little almond milk, and here we go.
There you go, man.
It's in my garage, and it's hot as hell out here, so I needed it cold.
You're in your garage?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Doesn't look like you're in your garage.
No, you know what these are? These are panels from Lowe's. You can see me shaking this one. $30 a pop, $60 for the full setup here.
Yeah.
The other side of this is my soundproofing, and I've got some towels and blankets hanging from the ceiling. I just figured it's this box right here. So
my background looks nice, but like it's an unfinished basement, right? And like the rest of it is like my wall's not even done yet, and it's like just kid stuff, and you gotta give the appearance that you're professional, though.
Yeah,
I think that's important. I mean, we'll get into your story, man, for sure. But we're kind of both early in the journey, but you kind of just start and figure it out, right?
Yeah, one of the analogies that really helped me at the beginning. I had a guy on my podcast. His name's Jordan Montgomery, and he used the analogy of building the airplane while you're flying it.
Yeah,
you can't try to build the whole plane and then go take off. Maybe only in that literal scenario, but in every other scenario, the metaphor applies. Like for me, it's just been like, I can't get it all perfect before I start.
I think that is why a lot of guys, never start, right? They're like, hey, I have this idea, I want to go do this thing, but like, it's not perfect. I gotta do more research, blah, blah, blah. And they just end up never starting, right? And they look back a year later, they're like, oh, I was gonna do this thing, but I just never did it. And you kind of just have to have like a rough draft, right? Of like, hey, this is the direction I want to head. This is kind of the vision that I have. And like, I'm going to figure it out along the way. And there's going to be obstacles and challenges that pop up. And I'm confident in myself that I'll figure out how to deal with them as they come,
Yeah, for sure. For me, it was perfectionism, which is really just like a fancy way to say that like you're scared to fail, scared of judgment, like you've got an ego. Like I had to unpack all that. And I was like, okay. So when I started my podcast, I took a course in January, paid a certain amount of money that was substantial to me to get started, where I was like, all right, I'm in this thing. And then I didn't launch until September. So it was like I did spend all this time like trying to do the little, like, just to your point, paralysis by analysis. I was trying to get it all perfect, and I just reached the point where I was like, I gotta get it
Yeah.
out there, and then we'll
There
figure
you
it
go.
out as we go. And then yeah, here we are. We're
Well, you look a
not
lot
a year in,
more
but
professional than I do. If I don't know if people aren't listening on, if they're not watching YouTube, they're just hearing this. I mean, Brendan's got like this nice background. Looks like he's got this awesome studio. Is that a microphone you have too?
it is the Shure
Yeah.
SM7B. I just upgraded to that. I was pretty pumped.
I don't even have a microphone. I don't have anything. I'm just on Google Meet and that's it.
Hey, dude, I'm telling you, it works. I didn't start with this microphone. To the point, I did not start with that microphone. I got
Yeah.
that like a month ago.
You're a couple
It took
steps ahead of
me,
me
it took me a
then.
few weeks to even figure out how to get it set up. You should have seen me looking up the YouTube videos and like calling people like, how the heck do I run this? And then they're like, you got to buy this other piece of equipment to then. And I was like, I'm about to just throw the whole thing away. But
Yeah, I know.
learning.
I see all these, like Facebook ads since I started the podcast. That they listen to everything, right? And so I see all these ads, coming to me about like, hey, the perfect podcasting setup, blah blah blah, And I was like, I don't know, man. Like maybe when I'm like 50 episodes in, I'll worry about quality,
Yeah.
right? But like to your point, like everybody's like, oh man, I gotta get all the equipment, gotta, you know, make sure I have like all these guests booked. I gotta make sure everything's right. And then before you know it, you spent, $1,000 on setup and you're like, oh, well, I haven't even started right yet. Right. And,
Yeah.
instead of just saying, all right, let's do it. Let's figure it out.
It's a perfect example of that perfectionism. Like,
Yeah.
it's just not the most important thing. It's marginal, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's like the bar of like, don't let your audio quality sound like garbage. And then
Yeah.
everything after that, it's like, it's little marginal steps.
Yeah. Yeah. And you get better as you go. So Brennan, tell people about your podcast, man. What do you have going on?
Yeah. So my podcast is Dad the Man. We started last fall. I can give you a little backstory, I guess, on me and then how
Yeah.
progressed into actually starting a podcast, which has been a really fun and exciting and challenging and scary journey all in itself. But I'm a pretty, like, on paper, if you look at me on paper, you looked at my resume, if you're looking to hire me, you'd say I'm a pretty middle of the road average dad. I'm about 30 years old, married, very happily married, 2 kiddos, 5 and 3, 2 little boys. I'm an accountant. I started in public accounting. Now I work in reporting at a big public company. So pretty middle of the road, standard 9 to 5 job in that capacity.
Yeah. I don't think I would hire you though, because you're an Auburn grad.
Yeah, that'd be tough. That'd be tough. I don't know. Yeah, it'd be interesting that one Saturday in the fall for sure. But man, I had kids young. So my first was born when I was about 24 years old, and that was a really exciting time for my wife and I. We'd been married about a year when he came into the world, so a lot happened. I graduated from Auburn, and I got my master's, got the CPA, did the CPA exam, did the whole thing, started my job. We got married, and then it was like, bang, we're having our first son, and we're like, okay, cool.
Was that like on purpose? Or you guys like, hey, let's
It was
start
not
a
on.
family?
It was not
Yeah,
on purpose.
okay.
Foot in mouth moment. I'll put this out there because I've told the story before, but I was very much like, I want to get to like this point in time, similar to the perfectionism thing, right?
Right,
Like, I
yeah.
wanted to have this amount of dollars in my bank, be at this point in my career, whatever, before we start a family. And I had just had a conversation with my wife. And I said, I would love, like, 5 years would be great. We'll be ready. And about 5 days later, I came
like,
home and there was a positive test and a little onesie on the table. And I was like, okay, foot and mouth. Now I feel like an a-hole here. This is a bad look. But obviously we were very excited. That was a good gut punch. Like, and a lot of people, you hear about friends, family, other people that, they want to have kids and they can't. So we just, blessing, let's roll. God gave it to us.
Yeah.
Let's take it and roll with it. So, man, I just had a lot of I think the pressure, the pressure to provide, to grow in the career, to do all that. Just, I felt all that instinctual response, and my outlet for that it all just turned into work. And it wasn't ill intentioned. I thought I was being a good husband. I thought I was being a good father, but like, I was allocating my time and my resources to my priority lists in like the opposite order. So it was just, everything was upside down. Everything I said I was doing for my family was really coming at their expense, right? And it's not a shame. Again, it's not to shame anybody for working hard, building their business, doing whatever it is. Like, I still absolutely believe in that, but it was to the point where it's just like I was just stressed, and I wasn't emotionally present when I was home. And when I was there, it was just like, my inbox is blowing up with emails from clients. I'm thinking about how I'm going to respond to them instead of, like, my son's like, hey, Dad, can you read me one more book? And I'm like, no, buddy, sorry. Like, that kind of stuff. And I'm like, that's where you kind of got to draw that line. And that just kind of mounted, and I didn't really realize how quickly that was mounting. And it was, it's kind of like the frog in the pot of boiling water, where you don't realize the water's you don't realize you're cooked until you see the water bubbling, and it's too late. And COVID happened, and COVID really served as a reset for me. I remember sitting in my living room, and we're all forced to be home. I didn't have, like, it's just more stress in the world, and normally my outlet was like, all right, man, I'm gonna go work through this, we're gonna be good. And man, I'm just sitting there, and I'm seeing the breakfast at the breakfast table. I'm seeing, the arts and crafts in the mid morning. I'm seeing, making lunches. I'm seeing, like, going to the park, going to the pool, doing all the things, the dinner time, the bedtime, everything in between. And I'm like, I'm missing a lot of life. And my kids that were 1 and 3 when I started this job are now, they're at this point, I'm looking back, and I'm like, man, they just went from 1 and 3 to 2 and 4 to 3 and 5. It's like time's going by, and I'm missing those years. And then I start feeling this haunting of, like, I can't get this back. But in that time, I just felt like God was pointing at me, pinning me down, like, brother,
Yeah,
this is the
this is
life
what you've
you're
been
missing.
missing.
You're
Yeah.
gonna miss this, right? And that kind of shocked me. So at that point in time, I was working public accounting world. I just left. I just dropped it, took the next job I could get that would give me a more 9 to 5. Not the most advisable. I wouldn't give anybody else that advice to just drop it and run, like, in the way that I did, because I then changed jobs again to where I am now, and now it's all worked out. But man, I just knew, like, I can't be the husband and father that I need to be doing what I'm doing right now. So I made
Yeah.
the change, and through a lot of prayer and reflection, I just had this calling in my heart. I felt like God put it there. Like, there's something in here that's got to come out. There's an expression. There's a lesson we can help people with this story, with this little lesson that I've learned. And my wife was looking at me, and she was like, "Why don't you just start a podcast and talk about it?" She was like, "People seem to listen to you when you talk." And that scared the crap out of me, because public speaking is my, like, biggest fear, and I feel like I'm a horrible communicator. That's always been an insecurity of mine. But it scared me. It excited me. And I felt like God had just grabbed me by the shoulders, squared me up, and said, run this direction. So I just started running that direction. So we started the podcast. I say we started the podcast. I mentioned before, I took the course on how to start a podcast and got a little coaching. And then 9 months later, after that, I launched in this past August, so August of 2021. And man, it's been an awesome ride. I've gotten to talk to people that I've followed for years on Instagram. I've gotten to talk to people who have had an impact on shaping my life. Like, just for example, like, I had John Eldridge on, who wrote Wild at Heart, and that book, there's
Yeah.
moments in
It was
your
a
life where you kind of
fantastic
have those
book.
one
Yeah.
degree turns. That was like a 10-degree turn in my life, reading that
Mm.
book. And that book is actually a part of the story of how we ended up getting here to begin with. That's a little bit deeper, but man, it's been a great ride. I've been able to interview a lot of people, but the whole thing is, I'm just trying to stop the guy that I would have been 10 years down the road,
Mhm.
right? The guy who would have gotten to, man, now my kids are leaving the house, and I'm looking back, and I'm like, I totally missed all of that. But, like, hey, maybe I've got this business, maybe I've got this career or these friends or these skills or whatever. But it's like, if it's all that and not the life at home that means the most to you, like, if you don't have those people to even share it with, like, why does it matter in the first place? So I'm
Yeah.
really trying to just share that lesson with people, and just show, like, man, these people that we all look up to, that we know, we respect, we follow what they do. Maybe they're an athlete or a writer, or maybe they're a podcaster, or business, or whatever it is. And they're great husbands and fathers at home first. And
Mhm.
then everything that they accomplish outside of that it's all an extension of who they are at home first. And those are
Yeah.
the guys we try to bring on and try to highlight. So
Yeah,
looking
I've
forward to
had
that.
I don't know who said this to me, but it had an impact on me, and just thinking about that whole kind of, work life balance is like a myth, right? Like, it doesn't exist. But if your family is the most important thing, then they need to be the first thing, because
Mhm.
when you leave and go to work, no matter how important work is for you, right? You could be climbing the ladder, have a lot of success at work, could be doing like really cool stuff. Like, your family doesn't see that. Like, your
Right.
family sees you leave in the morning, and then they see you come home, and that's
Mhm.
it. And if you're bringing that baggage home with you, it's just gonna have such an impact on the home life, and like, they don't care, right? Like, I say, I try to do, these daily affirmations, and I miss them sometimes,
Mhm.
just because life is crazy and busy, and we've got a 4-month old, and so life
The
is
trenches.
it's crazy right now. But basically, I tell myself, like, hey, my kids don't care about, like, how much money I make or how many Instagram followers I have, right?
Mhm.
They care that I'm present with them, and
Mhm.
so that just hit home with me, man. Was like, as big of an aspect work is to our lives, it's almost nothing to our family, right?
Mhm.
It's literally, it's just, you're gone for a little bit, and then you come
Mhm.
home.
Yep.
So, mm,
And for me, dude, the unlock too, I've thought a lot about this because it comes up on my podcast a lot. Like, and I think about like we all struggle with that, right? Because it's like we have these goals, we have these ambitions, we have to generate an income in some way, right? So it's not like I've always recently, especially like I felt shame stepping away from, I guess, my family to go do those things. To me, one of the unlocks has been just understanding the idea of stewardship. And like, if I am going to take time away, like my family's most important, if I'm going to go leave them for 8 hours, how I show up in those 8 hours while I am at work is very important to me. So, like, I think a lot of people end up, and I used to be this person, I used to slip into like, it just wasn't efficient. And like, I'm hanging around, I'm getting taking more coffee breaks and chatting and just it's just bad stewardship of the time. And as a result of that, you end up having to stay from 5 to like instead of leaving at 5, you're leaving at 6 or at 7.
mhm.
But all the golden moments of being a parent, especially as a dad or a mom, if you're out working during the day, they happen in that time from five
Yeah,
to seven. That's like dinner time to bedtime to bath time. Like that's it. Like
yeah,
people think it's going to be this magical like where like all the good moments happen at Disney World. Like that's not true. Like a great life is a great life that's lived well at home in those moments.
mhm,
So to me, it's like being able, like if I can go to work and I know like I'm gonna bust my rear while I'm here and I'm gonna set a good example, like not just to make a good living, but just to be an example for my family. So like if I'm gonna work, I'm gonna work hard.
yeah.
And I'm gonna value that time. Like I'm not gonna squander it. That's really helped me recently.
Yeah, I think COVID kind of brought that out of a lot of people in the corporate space, with just like how inefficient we really were with work, right? We're spreading out probably like 3 hours of work through, the 8 hour workday, and hey, working from home, like you have that ability to kind of, manage your schedule a little bit more,
Hmm.
and kind of block off those focus times and be like, well, I'll get my strategic work done and be efficient
Hmm.
because I know I'm going to take an hour and go upstairs and go have lunch with my family, right?
Yep.
And if I'm at the office, I might just grab something to eat real quick at my desk and do some inefficient work because I'm not really focused, right? And
Yep.
so, yeah, I think that's kind of opened people's mind, in people's eyes to like, hey, I can probably restructure the way that I work, just to be more efficient, so that I can put that focus work in that important time, to create an income for my family, but then to shut that off and then spend that time with my family.
Hmm. And the ability to be present is it's a hell of a skill, and that's what it all comes down to. That's like it's the undercurrent, I guess, of being a good steward of your time is you got to be present, right? Like
Yeah,
but it's
yeah.
hard.
And
It's
no,
hard.
man, it's so easy to have your cell phone on you at all times, and like, yeah, you may be with your family, but the email goes off, you're checking it, you're not really there, right?
Yeah. I will say, so when I went to, and I'm fortunate to be able to do this. I know in some jobs you probably can't, but like in my old job in the public accounting world, I always had email and like the team messenger and all that on my phone. And when I took this new job, I said, nope, that's a boundary I'm going to draw. And so I know when I leave, if I shut it down, I'm not going to see that email that comes through, or I'm not going to see the team's message or whatever it is. Like, so I really got to be dialed in when I'm there. Like, there's a clear line in the sand. Like, computer is closed.
Yeah,
I'm not going to get
yeah.
buzzed on my
And
phone.
that's tough, man, for guys that are in the corporate space and have high demands on them, and are looking to get results of like, how do you create that boundary, right? Like it's all fun, and easy to say like I'm going to set that expectation with my boss,
Hmm.
but hey, once when the phone goes off at 6:30 and says, hey, I need this, like how do you approach that conversation? Of like, hey, this is sorry, this is family time.
It's really tough. I think the upfront conversation though is really important, and I think that's intimidating. I know that's intimidating. Just to say like, hey, these are kind of my boundaries where I'm trying to stay, and I'm going to give you everything I've got, like 110%. If something urgent comes up and you gotta call me. Um, but I also might be at a little league game when you call me. Like that's
Yeah.
I did that this year. I coached t-ball and now it's like soft toss for my older son, but I coach their baseball teams and their games are at 5:30. So it's like
Yeah.
I got to leave work at 4:59 to be there at 5:30 to be able to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I'm very upfront about that, saying like, hey, I'm gonna be gone. Like this is a rock in my life. This is my priority. Me doing this is what is going to
It's
give
the
me
support.
the
Yeah,
freedom
what's
and the
support?
support and the
Mhm.
encouragement to actually show up when I am at work. And then, if I get the kids down at 8 and then I need to hop on and clean something up for 20, 30 minutes at night, like so be it. Hopefully that's not the case, but maybe it is.
Yeah,
But just people don't want to have that upfront conversation because it's new, right? Like we've never even been in the world where like that's a acceptable thing to do.
mhm,
Um, but I just encourage people if, if that's something you're thinking about, like the perspective I had to put myself into was like imagining myself being further down the line looking back and imagining being in a position where my kids they're leaving for college or leaving to go start their lives outside of our house, whatever that looks like, and I'm looking back and I'm going to have regrets that I wasn't there for certain things. And I think if you can have that perspective and dial that into the current moment where you got to say like, am I going to stay another hour and get this project done, or can it really actually wait till the morning and I'm going to go to this baseball game? Like
yeah,
this being able to have that perspective in the moment to me has freed me up a lot. And I won't say that it's really held me back a whole lot either, to be
yeah.
completely
And
honest.
I think honestly, like, you said upfront conversations, right? Like, I think if you have a good employer,
Hmm.
and a boss that's worth his salt, like he's gonna appreciate that conversation. I think,
100%.
and letting them know like, hey, I'm gonna be much more effective at my job, like when I'm here, if I
Hmm.
have that clear boundary, right?
Yeah.
And I know that I can shut it off, and come back in the next day and knock it out. But if
Hmm.
I'm trying to balance both of them at the same time, like you're probably gonna get ineffective work from me, right, during
Yeah.
that time. And so I think framing it that way can be a powerful conversation too. Of like, hey,
100%.
yeah, sure, I can do this tonight, but it's probably going to be 60% of my effort and probably 60% of what you want,
Yeah.
or I can create this boundary and I can knock this out first thing in the morning, 100%. Like, what
Yep.
would you rather have? I think a good boss is say, yeah, take that boundary, and then get it done when you can, so I can have 100% of your effort.
Yep. 100%. And it doesn't work 100 times out of 100,
Yeah,
but just doing it, like, and you'll see to your point, like that's something I would look for, I guess. Like if you're having that conversation, and more often than not, it's not like, I know every job, every industry is very different, but um, if there does, to me, I would be very frustrated if there was not a mutual respect of my own time and my personal life.
hmm
So I just encourage everybody to have that courage to try just begin having that conversation. Sometimes it's messy, sometimes it's a little intimidating, but you'll regret it if you don't.
yeah,
That's where I've landed.
yeah. No, totally agree with that, man. So, like, what have been some of your biggest learnings of your podcast? I mean, you had a number of guests on. I've taken a look at some of them, listened to a couple, some great conversations. Um, have there been some main themes that have kind of risen to the surface as far as kind of this state of fatherhood right now, where our culture is at, and how we're reflecting that upon the role of the dad?
Yeah, man, it's funny. I started this podcast because I really wanted to help other people, and nobody has benefited more from the podcast so far than me. Like 100%. I was That's a great question, and I love to reflect on stuff like that. I've been fortunate to have a lot of guys that really um, they poured a lot into the show, gave me a lot of their time and attention. I mentioned John Eldridge before; that was a big one for me. In his book Wild at Heart, he just talks about what biblical masculinity actually looks like, and what that looks like to really step up as a man. And that was an eye-opening, just like groundbreaking thing for revelation for me. So when I had him on, we had a great conversation just about leading young boys. I've got two boys, so that was selfishly very relevant for me. So that was like me just asking him all the questions I wanted to know the answers to. And so that was really cool. And he's just talking about leading boys and encouraging them to, like, we always have this default, especially with boys, because we're like, it's at a young age we're just naturally wired to take risk and to jump off the couch and the roof or whatever we can jump off of. Everything's a weapon. Everything's gonna break. It's everything's meant to be broken. Um, just not defaulting to the word no,
Yeah,
and just being conscious of that. I think that's something that we do with boys a lot. And when he said that, I immediately had this like shock through my body. I was like, damn it, I've been doing that.
yeah,
That's one of those things where I'm like, ooh, all right, cool, got this. I've got to really encourage him, call out, like, not try to stifle what is great about the wilderness of a young boy, but really honor and cherish what that is, because in my belief that comes from God, and if it comes from God, it's good. So rather than trying to stifle it, just learn how to maybe harness it. Maybe is a better
Yeah.
way to think about it. I had one recently, a guy named Yogi Roth. He is the lead anchor for the Pac-12 network. Really, really smart, savvy, articulate dude. He's written New York Times bestsellers. He coached with Pete Carroll for a little while at USC on their staff. Just a really interesting dude, cool dude. And I asked him about what he wanted his legacy to be, and he basically just said he wanted his kids to always say that they felt seen and heard by their
Mhm.
dad. And to me, that was another one where I'm like, that's a powerful, powerful position, and kind of contrary at times to the way acted as a parent. I think as a parent, it's easy to default to the I'm going to tell you what to do.
Mhm.
Like, hey, trust me, I'm right. Like, there's that inherent, like, I'm your dad, I know more than you, do it because I said so.
Mhm.
And when he said he wanted his kids to feel seen and heard, that was like the light switch moment of like, my kid may be kicking and screaming. That's probably like, it may just be kicking and screaming, but it also may be just a poor articulation of an
Yeah.
emotion that
I'm
he's
seeking
feeling that he can't
Yeah.
express,
Mhm.
right? And to be able to have that moment of, just giving him, holding a space to provide that psychological safety where he can express it and we can get to the point of what's actually bothering him.
Mhm.
And then, you extrapolate that out, that turns from like a guy who suppresses his emotions to a guy who knows how to articulate his emotions and understand them. And it's like, Jocko always says to detach from them, assess the situation, then step back in. I think that is like the precursor at the 3 to 5 year old age group, so that they can have that skill set later on. But man, there's a lot of little lessons like that I
Yeah.
picked up,
I mean,
and
I want to hit on two of those. So one, the first conversation about the boys, especially, are inherently going to want to take risks, right? And
mhm,
Jordan Peterson, I don't know if you're familiar with him.
yeah,
So a couple great books. I've got one sitting on my shelf right there. But he has a quote, and I'm going to butcher it word for word, but it was about us fathers and really society trying to remove risk, like to set these boundaries and remove
yep,
risk, like that, to have safety for our children.
hmm
Um, and his quote was something along the lines of, especially with boys, like that is the only time that they learn anything is when they are taking risks.
right,
Like that, like, and they're inherently going to push those boundaries, and like that's where they learn like what I have inside of me. How far is that boundary?
hmm
And that's like the only time that they're actually going to learn
right,
is by letting them do. I think it was his quote was like to do dangerous things safely,
yeah,
right? So like you're like as the dad, like obviously you're not going to let him do anything that's going to really really hurt himself, right? But hey, if he
right,
wants to jump off that couch that's 3 feet high, like what's the worst that's really going to happen? Right? Like hey, let's
yep,
let him take that small risk so that he
mhm,
can learn. Like okay, I can jump from 3 feet, but maybe I shouldn't jump from 4 feet because that hurts, right? And so he's gonna learn that a lot more by him doing it and taking action than by you just saying, "Hey, listen to me, I'm dad, I know better," right?
yeah, yeah,
So I think huge point on that is like, and especially me now that I've got a young son, it's gonna be new for me. I've got two girls, so raising a boy is gonna be different. So I'm really looking forward to having those conversations and saying, "Hey, buddy, like, yeah, go ahead and do it."
yeah.
We'll see what happens. You can learn for yourself.
I had Tim Kennedy on not too long ago, and he said in this similar conversation, he was just saying let the pain have a purpose, because he was saying like he was the middle child or second child, and stereotypically a second child, the wild man. His brother was like all buttoned up, dialed up, all American kid, and he was the ragtag second younger brother, and he just hell on wheels. And I've got two boys, so I was asking him like, man, what can I do with my second one, because he's hell on wheels too, and he was just saying let the pain have a purpose. And
Yeah.
it's I think an important question to ask, stuff like that. You're watching your little boys grow up, and they are looking at taking risks and doing different things. Like if you're telling them, the question I've had to ask myself is, if I'm telling them to not do something, is that because I'm scared that, like, I'm
Yeah.
scared of the emotional pain it's going to cause me to see them like get the little boo boo on their arm?
Yeah.
Or is it really like going to break their arm off? Like, is it really that bad? To your point, how bad can it really be? I think that's an important question. And two, like I found that something that was highlighted in my mind is part of the conversation as well, is just thinking about like, I think that really highlights the importance of a dad being in the home and being present when he is there as well. So, like in our family, my wife, she works part time, but she's home the majority of the time with the boys during the day, like if they're not at school or at an activity or whatever. And she's a phenomenal mother, like amazing mother. But the feminine nature, the nurturing nature, the protective mama bear nature is gonna say they're gonna lean towards the don't jump. Don't
Mhm.
jump off the 3-foot couch. That isn't really going to hurt you. Don't do it. There's more of, I think, a tendency to know, and that's not a bad thing. It's just a different essence. And I think it's a very important and pivotal spot for a dad to be able to step in, be present enough to step in those moments and say, "I've got this. You're good, buddy. Let's go." And it's not a disrespect or an overrule
Mhm.
of mom. Of course, there's conversations behind the scenes. Like my wife and I have talked about that. Like I got this. If I'm there, I got this. Trust me. You never want to correct your spouse in front of your kids. I think that's also a scary mistake you can make if you want to undermine each other. So I want to be careful to
Yeah,
caveat
if
that. But
you wanna live.
yeah,
Yeah.
you also want to live. You don't want to take the frying pan off the side of the head. But no, again, that's not a dig at moms at all. It's just the masculine and feminine nature is somewhat inherently different. Like,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? I think that role for the dad to be there to guide a son or a little boy or anybody he has the opportunity to lead in any way is just encourage that, right? And to your point, teach them how to do dangerous things safely.
Yeah. And then on your second point too on, really giving kids the ability to be seen and heard, I think is huge. I've always said that like I want to be the dad that when my kid is 17, and she is at a party, and she's had a couple beers, right? And
Hmm.
like, she knows, hey, dad doesn't want me to do that, but she does it anyway. But I want to be the dad that she feels comfortable enough to call me and say, hey, dad, I need a ride, as
Hmm.
opposed to saying like, I don't want my dad to find out, he'll be super mad at me. So I think by instilling those kind of lessons in them when they're young, right, and they can understand that hey, when they're throwing a tantrum, like you're not just going to say, hey, stop doing that, like, hey,
Yeah.
let's really assess the situation, see what's going on now, is it a cry for attention, like what's really going on.
Hmm.
And just by instilling that, early on, you're kind of building that muscle memory, right, of like, hey, I know what is acceptable, what's not acceptable, but I also know that my dad is going to listen to me, right? And he's
Yeah.
actually going to listen and actually care. And I think that by doing that young, teaching that lesson, it's just going to compound over time too, right? Of like once the conversations need to be a little bit more serious, like they're going to be
Mhm.
okay to have those conversations with you.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that too, because that made me think of another conversation I had on our show. Like I said, when I think back, I'm like, God, I didn't know anything before I started this podcast, because it's like everything that I've learned and picked up, like it's become the majority of how I parent, which is kind of funny. I interviewed a guy named Cal Callahan, and he talked about this idea of holding a space and just being a dad that can handle whatever it is that your kids bring to you. And I fall victim to sometimes reacting in the moment. It's like my 5-year-old does something that I'm like, it pisses me off, or I'm like, dude, we've talked about this 100 times. It's natural, especially as dudes, I think, to just react and be like, come on, like, dog, figure it, like, learn the lesson, come on. But the extrapolation of that over time is that like they're honestly they're testing to see what dad can handle. Like
Hmm.
what's going to make dad lose it.
Hmm.
And when they're little, they're seeking that boundary so that they can know, like, they find psychological safety in knowing where the boundary is.
Hmm.
But when they're older, it's like that's where, like, if there is that psychological safety isn't built there, then they won't bring anything to you, because
Yeah.
when you're like, if they don't think dad can handle it, like
Yeah.
if your daughter calls you and she's 17, she's at a party, and you chew her ear off over the phone,
Yeah.
she's not going to call you again.
No, she's not gonna call you next time.
Not going to happen again.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I think it's as fragile as, like, just don't react is the takeaway.
Mhm.
Just take a pause, parent your child, do what you need to do. Discipline is necessary, but there's a lot different in doing that. Big difference in doing that after you've taken a beat, taken 5 seconds, taken the let
Yeah.
me inhale, exhale twice,
Yeah.
then parent, as opposed to the immediate reaction. Because our
Yeah.
kids are just they're so freaking smart, and that's ingrained in them after it happens.
Yeah, and I do that too. I mean, I think, like you said, I think every guy has that kind of instinctual need to just like react, without
Yeah.
thinking. But I literally posted this on my feed today, was just like some tactical steps you can do, right? Because it's something I
Mhm.
struggle with. It's like I think you have to just take a broad look at yourself and say like, okay, where do I get upset and when do I get upset and why?
Yeah.
And then like
Yeah.
just kind of take a step back and not blame yourself on it, but just to understand that like, hey, when this happens, this is when I respond. And I
Mhm.
respond negatively. And so now I know, hey, when I encounter this situation again, I can identify that like, hey, I'm probably gonna get triggered right here.
Yeah.
So what I'm gonna do instead of just reacting is I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna take 3 deep breaths. I'm gonna get some perspective on it, and then I'm gonna respond, as opposed to just having that reaction. But I think a big part though is just being able to identify what is causing you to react,
For
and like
sure.
identify that, hey, I'm about to do this.
Mhm.
I need to take a different approach.
Yeah, and it's funny, man. People think that like talking about your emotions, understanding them, that's like this like softer, feminine, just not a cool thing for a guy to be worried about. But it's so tactical to being able to parent your children, to be able to have a thriving relationship with your wife, to be able to succeed in literally anything that you do. Like if you're just walking around and your emotions have the majority vote, then like bro, you have no idea where you're going to end up. You could be anywhere. Like, and it's probably not going to be an out. You're probably not going to end up with an outcome that you want. It's it's a skill and it's hard. It's funny. I speak about it like it's. I'm trying to get better at it, but dude, it's so hard to do these things. It's so hard to
Oh
understand
yeah,
your
being
emotions.
a
It's so
parent,
hard to not scream at your kids when they piss you off. It's hard, dude. It's
yeah,
tough.
being a parent is like the most rewarding, frustrating, exhausting like job ever. I mean, it's incredible, but yeah, it's tough, man. It is very tough. So in all your conversations you've had on the podcast, like I think or I'll frame it like this: my big thesis statement, and I've committed to myself to write a book. I don't know how long it's going to take. I haven't set a date yet, but I've committed
Okay.
to write one. And the thesis statement behind the book is really like, hey, the state of culture that we're in and the decline in culture that we've seen,
Mhm.
when you go to root cause analysis, right? Like I used to be in consulting, and did a lot of like process improvement, did a lot of strategy, a lot of like root cause analysis, right?
Yep.
And so a big thing was, hey, like let's don't treat the symptom. Let's actually go downstream a little bit and really understand what's the root cause and let's treat that. And the symptoms are going to take care of themselves.
I wish
Um,
everybody felt that way.
and when you look at society right now and you really back it out and look at common factors, kind of across like broad spectrums, my thesis statement and hypothesis is it is because of the lack of leadership and fathers, that we are in the state that we're in right now. And it's been happening over the past, 60, 70 years. And so it's taken a long time for us to get here because it's generational.
Yep.
And really to affect change, it's going to take, a generation or two to affect that change
Yep.
because it's gonna start now with us taking on the traditional role of the father, becoming a leader in our family,
Yep.
making positive impacts individually in our own lives, in our family's lives, in our community lives, and then that's going to trickle down, right? Okay, now my child is going to teach that to their children are going to teach that to the next generation, and
Mhm.
then 70 years from now, I think we can turn the tide. Like it's not going to be overnight, but that's the thesis statement that I have, and so I'd love to get your perspective on culture today. What the role of the father is, and really like how we've gotten here.
Yeah, that's a big question, and it's a question that is apparently not being asked enough. So I appreciate you asking it, and I totally agree with what you said. I said before when I started or I was thinking about the idea of stewardship. Like if I'm going to take time away from my family, I want to make sure that I can make the absolute like biggest impact that I can on whoever it is that I'm with, whoever it is that's going to come across my work, whatever it may be. And right now I'm at work, so I'm in a 9 to 5, 8 to 5 role, whatever. And when I'm there, I give it everything I've got. But when I started this podcast, it's the same idea. Like the biggest impact that I believe that I can make on planet Earth is outside of being a great husband, being a great father, and I feel like this came from God, is to try to lead other men to do the same in their own house. I think the biggest impact that can be made on society right now, the quickest, is for men to lead themselves, to lead their families, and then to lead their communities. And I think it starts at that small of a level. And we see people all over the place, and they're massive business leaders, political leaders, leaders of countries, and leaders of, maybe it's communities online or whatever it is. They're leaders of all these other groups of people, but they can't lead themselves or their families effectively. And to me, that's a flawed situation when the family at home is being neglected for everything else out there. And it's all, to me, it's all everything outside of that. If you don't have that foundation at home dialed in first, and you're a husband and a father, I think everything outside of that it's going to end up, it's a road to nowhere. Like, what's the point? Like, at some point you're going to look back and you're going to say, well, shoot, I didn't raise my kids. I didn't love my wife. I missed all the moments that, like, you're going to care about when you're on your deathbed. And
Mhm.
God willing, you're able to have that moment of reflection. But at some point, that regret's probably going to come in. But man, I fall into the trap too. Like, man, how many people are listening to my show? How many people are following me on Instagram? All this. And I'm like, sometimes I ask that question before I ask, how my wife's doing that morning.
Yeah.
And that's a real conversation I have with myself. And that's somebody who's, I'm pretty aware of it, right? Like, I'm conscious about it. I think about it, and it's still a struggle. I think part of the underlying problem for us as men is struggling with this idea of validation and not understanding where our validation comes from and where it needs to come from. I think we go looking for validation in all the wrong places, a lot of the time, and that's the reason why we get we get fired up when we go make the next deal at work, or we go do whatever it is. We get the next 100 followers, or the next 1,000 followers, or downloads, or we sell the business, or whatever we have the accomplishment, whatever, because we think that validation is going to fulfill us and make us happy. But if that comes at the expense of, like, that just you can't have that be your sole source of validation. It's never going to work. It's just,
Mhm.
you're going to be pouring it through a filter. It's going to go right out of you as soon as it comes in. Um, I'm just a big believer in looking for your validation in the right place. And for me, that comes from my faith. Um, I'm a guy who's always had a relationship with God. More recently in my walk with faith, it's been actually learning the Bible. And that's kind of an open thing for me to talk about. I haven't really talked about that too openly. That's a little bit scary to talk about, because sometimes you feel like a fraud if you don't, if you say you're a Christian,
Yeah.
you don't know the
Not
Bible as well
walking
as
the
you feel
walk.
like you
Yeah.
should. There's some imposter syndrome there. But my validation comes from feeling like I'm walking where God is leading me to walk one step at a time. And when I do that, that leads back to him. And then that leads back to me taking care of my wife and loving her, supporting her emotionally, not just being there, not just doing the things around the house, but being there, like
Mhm.
making sure her cup is filled, and then being there with my kids. And then, like, the ripple effect from that alone, if every man did that within his own home, the ripple effect would just
Yeah.
be earth shattering.
Yeah, and that's my whole hypothesis is, like, let's not focus on the symptom, right? The symptom is, hey, society is a wreck right now, blah blah politics and all this stuff, and it's like, yeah, like, okay, yeah, we're in a bad spot, but, like, that's a
Yeah.
symptom. Like, if we really want to make impact, we need to focus on root cause, and that is with us, trying to achieve personal excellence, right? In what
Yep.
we feel, we feel value in, making sure we are walking the path of being there for our family, and having that impact in our own home. And like you said, the downstream effect of that is if enough people do that, and if we do that over time, you're going to see this huge generational culture shift.
Yeah.
Um, and
Otherwise, as a society, we're just chasing our tail. Like,
yeah,
I'm going out here trying to lead all these other people, and those people are trying to go lead those other people.
yeah,
Those people are trying to lead the other people, and then we're just running in circles chasing our own tail. I'm like, if everybody just took care of their own damn selves and their own damn family first,
yeah,
and then you can go with some conviction, because you know that you can actually lead yourself and lead other people.
yeah,
That's a whole different ballgame.
yeah. So yeah, I really feel like that's gonna, that's the reason why I started, my company, and this podcast. They're very similar to yours, it's really, hey, take care of your own house first, right?
Yeah,
And I think that's how we're gonna see the biggest impact is
yeah.
let's get enough people to do that.
There's also that element of throwing stones from a glass house as well.
Yeah.
It's like, and I struggle with that even doing the podcast. I'm like, man, I'm giving all this advice and I'm sharing all these lessons, but I still wake up and fail every single day.
Oh
Like,
yeah, bro.
you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's a little bit of
And
that too.
that's hard, man. That's tough to grapple with. Like, I have the same thing, right? It's that imposter syndrome. It's like,
Mhm.
I think, you know, it's one just from like a confidence perspective of like, getting your voice heard, voicing your opinions, etc. And whether you want to or not, like people are going to look at you as a leader. They're going to
Mhm.
look at you as an expert. So I think it's very important to let your audience know that like, hey, I'm making mistakes every single day,
Yeah.
guys, like every day. Like literally every day. And I'm learning as well. And I think what my purpose with this podcast and probably with yours as well is like I'm not here to tell you what to do. Like I'm here because we're on the same path together and we're on the same journey together.
Yep.
And if I can be of any value to that, then that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And so yeah, man, it's tough, the imposter syndrome. And I feel like I feel most fulfilled, I guess, when I am one, trying to lead others, right?
Mhm.
And then two, when my actions are congruent with what I'm saying.
Yes.
And so that's difficult too. Is like, hey, if I'm going to be on here preaching good dad stuff, shit, like I probably need to be doing this,
Yeah. That's the old
so,
integrity gap right there. That's
yeah,
good stuff right there.
yeah. So, well, Brendan, what's next for the podcast, man? Like, where do you see it going?
That's a great question, man. That's a great question. And it's something I've been thinking about a lot. I've been praying about it a lot. I don't know the answer to it. I've kind of relinquished my own control of trying to figure that out, which might sound crazy, might sound like a bad business move. Um, I said before, I felt like God just squared me up in this direction and said, run this way. So that's what I'm doing, man. I'm running as hard as I can with it. Also trying to balance that with a full-time job that's becoming more and more demanding as I grow in the role that I'm in, and a family that's growing more and more demanding the older my
Right.
kids get. And we're trying to grow our family through adoption right now. So there's a lot going on in our house. It's a lot of emotions, a lot of ups and downs. I mean, just yesterday we had a case that we presented on, and we just sometimes you just got a gut feeling you might get picked, and turns out we didn't. So it's just another roller coaster, and trying to balance it all. So with the podcast, it's like it's a fun outlet for me, and it's a fun way for me to pursue a dream and also be in the vein of what's most important to me with the podcast. So we're just trying to help as many people as we can, trying to bring on the coolest, best, baddest guests that we can too, and just show that, man, we're all in this together. Like the best athletes in the world, the best actors in the world, the guys we all
Mhm.
know and love and look up to, man, they're all great husbands and fathers first. Oh, not all of them, but the ones I'm trying to bring on the show, they are that first, and then what they accomplish outside of that is an extension. So we're trying to highlight those guys, man. Trying to help men love and lead their families better. And we just started a Facebook group, Dad the Man Facebook group. So trying to get some guys in there and just connect with people a little bit
Yeah.
better and lead them better. So I
Yeah. Well, I think that the path will illuminate itself, I think, when the time is right, and
think so.
I'm a big believer in, what you put out in the universe is going to come back to you.
Yep.
So I think, just putting out your message, providing value, being there for guys is going to, pay dividends for you whenever that path is illuminated.
Yeah, I'm excited about it, man. It's been fun. It scares the heck out of me every time I come on and I'm gonna talk to somebody and I'm like get the butterflies a little bit. I like I said, public speaking scares the crap out of me to begin with. So it's a fun ride for sure.
Yeah. Well, Brandon, what's the name of the podcast? Where can people find it?
Dad the Man podcast. You can find it pretty much anywhere you're going to listen to podcasts, Spotify,
Yeah.
Apple, all the big ones. If you find a spot where it's not on there, DM me on Instagram. You can find me. It's BrendonWall.dad. You can find me there. Let me know if it's not on the player that you listen to, and I'll get it synced up to do that. But yeah, man, just if anybody wants to check out the podcast, I'd really appreciate it. But man, I really appreciate you having me on today, and I have so much respect for what you're doing, the mission you're on, the business you're building, the podcast, the people that you're bringing together. Like I said, I think it's the biggest change that we need to see in our world today, um, and it's a big task. It's a hard task, but I have so much respect for you for taking it on as well, and I'm glad that we were able to connect and chat, and I look forward to staying in touch. And man, I'm pumped to watch you grow as well. I'm pumped to watch this business take off and support you and everything like that. So, man, it's just blessing to be here. Thank you for having me
Yeah.
on.
Awesome, Brendan. Well, dude, thank you for coming on, man. I'm so glad we connected. Guys, I'll put all the links to where you can go find Brendan in the show notes. So go check him out. Go give the podcast a listen. Go give a 5-star review. Absolutely, anything less than 5 stars is not needed. But I don't think we'll have to press you to do that. Brendan's podcast is awesome. But guys, yeah, show notes, find all the links. And Brendan, thanks for coming on, man. We'll definitely stay connected, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.